All right. This is the 31st lesson we're having in John, and last week we looked in depth at final passages in John chapter 5. And in there, we looked at the sort of first thing, we looked at the word frequency usage, and it was kind of clear there was a shift in certain terminology or words that were used. Do anybody remember kind of what one of those key words was that kind of popped up repeatedly in that last section of John chapter 5? Think of like a courtroom, okay? You know, the witness.
Testifies.
Okay? The witness and the testimony. This was kind of that language that was just over and over repeated that John used. And we had what was called the fivefold witness of Jesus in that chapter, remember? And anybody remember what those 5 elements were that testified to who he was in that chapter?
The scriptures.
The scriptures, yeah.
The God, the Father.
The Father, yeah.
The
I did not plug these answers through.
John what are we at?
John 5.
John 5.
The works.
The scripture, okay.
The
The works, okay, thank you, the works, very good, that's 3 out of the 5.
The man at the well,
Say again?
the guy at the pool. I don't
No.
remember.
Not the invalid himself, no, but that would be part of the works, that would be.
What are we on 5?
Fivefold witness, John chapter 5.
Did we already say testimony?
Well, that's what the whole thing is about. What are those witnesses? Who is Jesus using to back him up in his claims?
Oh, John the Baptist.
John the Baptist, very good. And one last one, end of the, yes, Moses, okay, good.
And now I remember.
Yeah, you remember, okay. Now you're focusing, refocusing, excellent. Okay.
So I read my last name as Moses. That's how tired I am.
Okay.
Okay.
We don't have Larry here to read. Okay, just to get the entire narrative here, I'll just read just to get through it. What I wanted to do was just pick 3 people, okay, to read the Matthew, Mark, and Luke accounts as we go through. I'll direct you what to read, okay? So I have a volunteer, Peggy, okay,
I'll read one.
Dale,
Well, I'll do it.
and Cheryl.
I got
Okay,
it. I just got it
okay.
right now.
Peggy, you're Matthew, Dale, you're Mark,
Yeah.
I'm Luke.
you're Luke.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. I'll just read the John stuff since we're in there and throughout. Okay, John 6, 1 through 15. This is the 4th of how many signs that are in the book of John?
7.
7, exactly. This is the 4th one. So we're in the middle one, okay? John 6, 1 through 15. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. And a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. Lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat?" He said this to test him, for he knew himself what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get a bite or a little. One of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they for so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, "Gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." Perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. All right. The resurrection and this miracle, the feeding of the 5,000, are the only 2 common miracles shared by all of the Gospels. Resurrection and the feeding of the 5,000. So none of the others are covered by all of them, other than those 2. So this is an important miracle is what I'm getting at. If all of them cover it, that's pretty important stuff. So we need to recognize it and understand it for what it is. At the scene, it is going to trigger a sort of a messianic fervor, an expectation. We'll find that out later. But the miracle itself, what happens, we'll find out at the end, sort of towards the end of John, it's going to trigger just kind of a massive breakup, you might say. So it's sort of at the high point, but then it ends up in a sort of a crash, okay? We'll see that later. So interestingly, later on, after this event, we will find we have the feeding of the 5,000 covered here in these accounts, these passages. There's also the feeding of the 4,000. You probably have heard of that one, right? Well, two of the Gospels cover that. And it's very similar. It sounds like, why are we doing this again? It seems like the same story, does it not? With deja vu sort of a thing? Mm-hmm. Well, there's very important differences between those two. We're not going to get into those today. But it is distinctively different. And it's sort of, once you realize it, it's like, well, I never saw it in that light. But it just sounds so similar that you just think, oh, it's just a repetition of what we just heard. I can just read through it and skim it. I've already heard it, you know. But in actuality, it is a pretty important miracle in itself to understand. Okay, and the funny thing about that is that, you know, it's basically a few months after this one that we have the feeding of the 4,000. We're talking about maybe 4 months. And it's like they completely forgot what happened at the feeding of the 5,000. Just saying. It's like, hello, can't you guys don't remember? Anyway, so we're not going to discuss that. I might have Scott Dever, so we'll be out in the first 2 weeks in December, Dale and I, to go travel. And I'll have Eric teach 1 week, and then Eric Heiderson and probably Scott Dever the second week will cover me, and maybe I'll give them that topic to discuss, to compare and contrast the two feedings there. All right, so today what I want to do is sort of have us experience a little bit of what this feeding of the 5,000 was like, and we'll go through it in more detail here. I want you to see it through the disciples' eyes a bit more. So as I said, I'll assign the accounts. Okay, Cheryl, you're Luke, Peggy, you're Matthew, Dale, you're Mark, right? Okay. Now, you'll find there are multitudes of video reenactments of this in every film of Jesus, you know. It's common. Everybody has to do a feeding of the 5,000, right? So on the internet, I looked up, and I've not seen the Chosen stuff, so I pulled it up. It was the first one that came up. It was an interesting clip. It had a lot of good things to it in terms of like just realizing, getting the picture of the crowd size was really phenomenal. It really had a great portrayal of that. But oftentimes, sometimes producers and all, they will inject a bit of gratuitous culture into the thing, so into the showing. So they had, for instance, Jesus is teaching the crowd while they're all sort of sitting down listening to him. And he says, he's teaching the crowd about the pearl of great price parable, and this is what he says. Listen carefully, because this is accessible to all of you, regardless of race or creed. When did Jesus ever say that, you know? But it's just a little bit, I don't know, DEI stuff or something you got to throw in there, you know? But anyway, I just never recalled Jesus saying that. So each gospel account has slightly different variations. They're not contradictory, they're complementary, and we need to understand them that way. One of them may say, didn't cover one that another one has in it. Or they may look at it as a different way or a different light, okay? This is all focused on the Sea of Galilee. It's going to be near Bethsaida, as we had looked at before. And essentially, the Sea of Galilee, a couple of parameters about it. It has to go walk around, it'd be about 33 miles. You could do it in a day, a full day, you could actually do it. It's 13 miles long at its longest, and it's about 8 miles wide at its widest, okay? It has a max depth of 140 feet, not that that's of tremendous interest, but it is 686 feet below sea level. It is the lowest freshwater lake on the earth. Interesting, yeah. Trivial Pursuit or something. Think about that, or Jeopardy, okay? To walk from basically Tiberias to Bethsaida be about 14 miles, about halfway around the lake. All right, so a few details there. It says in verse 1, after this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. I'm not going to go ahead and discuss the other things. Remember, this has been a year since the end of John chapter 5, okay? What's been happening? Well, you pull out your handy dandy chart there I gave you. Basically what has happened is Jesus has gone up to Galilee, and a whole year has spent in this time up in Galilee. You know, all those miracles that are in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, those ones where he's doing all those healings with the centurion and raising the widow's son and all that kind of stuff. That's happening in this period here. So it's going to be a full year. When this after this means it's a year. It seems like a lot in just a couple of words. But anyway, that's how to understand that. It's he's going to be returning down to Jerusalem soon, but at this point he's not there yet. So he's been up there a year. After this, he went away to the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. All right. So, and on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, this is where we looked at Bethsaida here, which is also, it's called the Sea of Tiberias. That's not, it's not a sea, okay? It's not open to the open oceans. It's just named that because it's a body of water, and people sometimes call lakes seas. Let's face that. But it is technically be the lake of Galilee and all. But at any rate, it is the Sea of Tiberias, and the reason why they call that is because back about 20 AD, the Roman emperors, the list of them, it goes Caesar Augustus, and then Tiberius is the next one. Well, he had made for him Herod a town, Tiberias, and so he named the lake after him. So people had a dual name for it, either Sea of Tiberias or Sea of Galilee. And oftentimes in the Old Testament, there's a few times it is referenced, but it's called the Sea of Kinnereth. You may find that. It's like Joshua, Deuteronomy, and all. And Kinnereth means a lyre, or like a harp, and it's sort of shaped like a harp. That's why it has that name there. Okay, let's read verse 2a. And a large crowd was following him. A large crowd. Now, where does this crowd come from? We're going to look at the other Gospels and get ready to read your parts there, people. The crowd was following him. Now, when you say that they're following him, and I think this is basically used in both a literal, meaning they were where he went, they went, but also in the sense of a spiritual, metaphorical. They were listening to him, they were following what he was saying, okay? And they wanted to be part of the discipleship club, you might say. Okay, Matthew and Mark's account, just to let you know, it is preceded by John the Baptist's execution. Okay, so John, remember that story with Herodias, and they cut his head off, and it is presented to Herod and all that. Well, John's disciples tell Jesus this. So it is at this time that the feeding of the 5,000 occurs. Also, that's Matthew and Mark. In Luke's account, the disciples had just returned from their short evangelistic mission. Remember, Jesus sends them out, okay, by twos or whatever, and they go through the countryside doing these miraculous things, sort of an evangelistic mission. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand, right? Okay, so let's start Matthew, Peggy, 14:13.
Now, when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. But when the crowd heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd.
Okay, thanks, right there. Okay, now, so when they heard it, they withdrew from there to a boat. They heard the news about John the Baptist's death. They're withdrawing, okay, they're going away to a desolate place, and all of a sudden there's all these crowds there, okay? Mark 6:30 to 33.
The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all that they had done and taught. That was from when he had sent them out, right? 2 by 2. He said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a remote place and rest for a while." For many people were coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. So they went away in the boat by themselves to a remote place. But many saw them leaving and recognized them, and they ran on foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them.
Okay. Sounds like they want to get to Jesus, right? They ran on foot and all, so they're excited to do this. But what is Jesus trying to do?
Get away.
Get away, kind of draw them away, right? Lastly, Luke 9:10 to 11.
On their return, the apostles told him all that they had done, and he took them and withdrew apart to a town called
Bethsaida, okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
When the crowds learned it, they followed him, and he welcomed them and spoke to them of the kingdom of God and cursed those who had made
Read that again. What did he say?
cured those who
He
had
cured those, okay. One little letter can do so much. It's kind of amazing, isn't it?
Well, if you keep going, it would have been curse the ones that needed cursing.
Thank you, good save.
Okay, all right, that's fine, sure. Okay, that's no problem, okay. I corrected, I didn't want to say Bethesda because that was where the pool was.
You're right,
you know,
yes, my
the
fault.
info was. Okay,
So, yeah.
all right, so And you can see there's obviously the synoptics, they show a high pace of activity with this evangelistic mission, and then there's bombshell news about John the Baptist's execution, okay? So Jesus realizes we need to pull together. We need to regroup. You need rest after all this activity and stuff. It's been so frenetic and all. We need to come back and center down, as we sometimes do ourselves, right? So, but then all of a sudden the huge crowd appears. It says in verse 2b, John, because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Now you remember this language, they saw the signs. Where did you hear this before?
From the guy at the pool.
Okay, well, look, even earlier than that.
No, like the end of chapter 1.
End of chapter 2.
Okay, yeah, it was chapter.
Remember these people, they saw the signs.
But Jesus didn't trust them.
Exactly. It was sort of like it was shallow how belief, okay? So like it wasn't very deep. They were just looking there for the moment, for the miracles, for the show, So we just keep that in the back of our mind there. And we will find this problem exhibits itself at the end of the chapter. Notice that he is healing the sick there, okay? Luke's account says that Jesus was speaking to them about the kingdom of God. And as I said, we just talked about that before, that time in The Chosen where he's talking about, the parables and stuff like that. But I'm just wondering, I can't imagine 15,000, this is not in a nice stadium with sound projections, and amplification. How did he do it? I think that's a miracle in its own right, I would think, if everybody could actually hear. I don't know how it would be possible, but you look at the crowd, take a look at the video clip of The Chosen there. It's quite
It kind of reminds you of Acts when they got the Holy Spirit and they were talking and it was all in the different languages. But there was lots of people there too. So, how do they?
Yeah. There's so much other noise there oftentimes, screaming kids or whatever. So it says in verse 3, Jesus went up on a mountain and there he sat down with his disciples. Now, mountain may just mean high ground. It may not mean a particular big mountain that was specific to the area. We would look at this there up around here somewhere. The Golan Heights is what it's called now. But he just wanted to get a retreat environment. This is not a nice tourist hotel, a resort area or anything like that. Go out by the pool and enjoy yourself. This is desolate in itself. It's just to get away from the crowds. So we reread Mark 6:31 again. One more time.
6:31.
Yeah.
For many people were, he said to them, come away by yourselves to a remote place and rest for a while. For many people were coming and going and then did not even have time to eat.
Are you reading the ESV version, by the way?
Oh, it's the
Okay,
CSB.
okay.
Do you want me to do the
No,
ESV?
that's fine.
Well, I'll change it, but
Okay.
I didn't realize that.
All right, so again, it's just the idea that they needed rest, okay? Now, at verse 4, John says, the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. Now, this is more than just an informational tidbit he's telling us here, okay? This is a significant thing that he's saying, but of course he's not drawing attention into it the way we might look at it. It's not in bold print, Is that Jesus normally attends the Passover, remember that? But we can envision, because remember with the business of the Sabbath, you hear him saying he is Lord of the Sabbath, okay? So I think we can say he is Lord of the feasts as well. So if he chooses not to go to Jerusalem for the Passover, he's kind of Lord of the thing anyway. That's how I kind of look at it, in the sense why he's not showing up in Jerusalem. But the significance of John's point is it's not that it's chronological. It's not just a point in time. It is, again, it's theological. It is massively important to this discussion, and the one who focuses on it is going to be John, but we're not going to see it today. We'll see it next time about why this is important. But he's tying this whole event in with the Passover. It governs the whole narrative. All right, so verses 5 and 6. Lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, where are we to buy bread so these people may eat? He said this to test them, for he knew himself what he would do. Matthew 14, 15 and 16.
Now, when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, this is a desolate place, and the day is now over. Send the crowds away to go into the village and buy food for themselves. But Jesus said, they need not go away. You give them something to eat.
Thank you. Mark 6:35 to 37a, the first portion.
35. And when it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, this was a desolate place, and the hour is now late. Send them away to go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. But he answered them, you give them something to eat. And
Okay.
they said to him, oh, is that all you
Luke 9, 12, 13a, the first part of 13.
Now then they began to wear away, and the 12 came and said to him, send the crowd away to go into the surrounding villages and countryside to find lodging and get provisions, for they are here in a desolate place. But he said to them, you give them something to eat. They
Okay,
said,
that's good. Hey. When is this occurring in the day?
Late in the
Late.
evening.
It's late, okay? Just note, it's just not like noon, this is not lunchtime, okay? It's later than that. Not breakfast, okay? So it's kind of on the late side. It's beginning to get towards evening, okay? Now, so what's gonna happen soon? It's gonna get dark, okay? So, who is concerned about the crowd here? The disciples.
yes,
Does it say Jesus is concerned about it?
no,
It
No,
doesn't.
it says that Jesus knew what was gonna happen.
Thank you. Okay, Jesus, he is concerned about it, right? But he's not showing it, basically. You'll see a marked difference in the feeding of the 4,000. We're not gonna discuss that today. But anyway, that's one of the differences. But the idea here is that the disciples are seeing this situation at hand, right? And I think they're sort of like, they're beginning to panic a little bit. You see that? The disciples are all concerned. And what are they worried about?
The crowd turning.
Well, I think that is the case. I think that's a possibility,
They
right?
get hangry.
Yeah.
It's certainly
A crowd can turn,
ugly, right?
yeah, and when they're hangry, that really.
I think that's perfectly a valid thing that they'd be concerned with.
Because it's sort of like, you've led us out here in the middle of nowhere. It sounds like.
Sounds like when the Israelites back in Moses' day, right? You know,
Yeah.
we're better off in Egypt, right?
Right.
Okay, what else might they be not liking, okay? I mean, I just like, this is bad PR, Jesus. You know, I mean, this is not good. This is bad public relations. This is embarrassing, you know? It's not my responsibility to care for this crowd, right? What if they turn on us? So, but then what does Jesus do?
He turns it back on them.
And says what?
You give it
you
to
give
them.
I mean, can you imagine being there and you have nothing? And he said, you give them, your jaw would probably kind of drop, I would think, on the floor at that point. But none of them reply, hey, this ain't our responsibility, okay? I think at least we'll give them credit for that. They at least looked at, okay, we're gonna check our resources here, okay? He questions who? Philip. Why Philip?
Because he's from there.
He was from the town there, right? Bethsaida. So he's like, he knows where all the good spots to eat, okay? But unfortunately, Benny's catering is closed. Okay? There's got an issue here. You can't go call on him, okay?
And to
So
feed 5,000 people.
just men. We're talking like more like maybe 10 to 12, 15,000 upward when you look at women and wives, children, and so forth like that. That's a possibility. It's not just 5,000, but yeah, it's an enormous crowd, right? So John's comment about Jesus' foreknowledge of events, that keeps us from thinking that, man, Jesus doesn't know what he's going to do. He's ad-libbing this whole thing. He's just going to play it out and hope for the best. But John makes sure we understand. Jesus knows what he's doing. It's I hate to call it a setup in a sense, but it's to get the disciples, right, to start thinking, to start depending upon him in ways they never had, okay? So was it fair that he asked Philip, Philip's like, this is a futile attempt, right? Why are we even here doing this? Does Jesus want to see them squirm? Is he masochistic in that way? No, he's not at all. But again, it's to stir up something in them to get them to think about who he is. And
It's a teachable moment.
I like that, a teachable moment. Thank you.
Like
Okay.
Darkus.
Okay, so Philip answers him, 200 denarii in verse 7 worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get a little, meaning like just a bite. You couldn't even get that. Now, Mark 6:37b, the last segment in there.
Okay. And they said to him, shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?
I think they're saying this because this is how much they have. This is how much they have. This is all they have in the piggy bank, in the money bag, in the wallet, So this is like, we're going to be overdrawn here real quick. The bank's going to come after us.
Did you ever figure out how much money that is, or what?
I'm going to tell you in just a second.
Thank you.
Okay, so their question tells us 200 denarii was the current contents of the wallet. 1 denarius, the commentators figure, is about a wage for a day's work. So what they're saying is 8 months of labor wouldn't begin to it would just give them a bite to eat, is really what they're even saying. nothing like even approaching a meal. So Philip, again, he's thinking only on the natural resources we have here, right? It's all about the marketplace kind of thing. It's nothing, above that. It's just like simple, I've done an equation, I've done a calculation here. 15,000 and so forth like that. So now have they already seen Jesus do miracles?
Yes.
Undoubtedly, many times, right? Obviously, water into wine was one such thing, the first sign, right? So now, in verse 8, one of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, says to him, okay, so it said to him, I'm going to stop there for a moment. So Andrew, this is not Philip, this is now Andrew. Andrew goes into the crowd, okay? And what does he do? Andrew had gone into the crowd to see what those resources were. Verse 9, there was a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they for so many? Andrew's personality, if you will recall from John chapter 1, he kind of brings people to Jesus. That's his thing, okay, his MO. He brought Simon Peter to Jesus. So here he's bringing the little boy to Jesus. And Luke 9:13b. Cheryl, 9:13b.
9:13. Okay. They said, we have no more than 5 loaves and 2 fishes unless we are to go and buy food for all these people.
Thank you. Matthew 14:17-18.
14?
Yeah, chapter 14, 17-18.
Oh, I got you
Sorry.
confused me, I'm sorry. They said to him, we have only 5 loaves here and 2 fishes. And he said, bring them to me.
Okay. Now I'm going to just add the way that you read it, Cheryl.
Yep.
I'm going to say we have no more than this. Peggy, we have only 5 loaves.
Only have 5
That's
loaves
it. Okay,
here.
there's
and
a-
2 little fishes.
Exactly. So there's this sense of desperation here. Okay. This is all we got to work with. Help us out here. Okay. We don't have only this stuff. Now John adds an interesting detail. What does he say about the loaves specifically?
Barley.
They're barley loaves. Now, in the Old Testament, barley is a noted grain, okay? Would you remember what book it sort of talks about barley probably the most?
Ruth.
The book of Ruth, right? It's at the barley harvest that all these events take place with Boaz and Naomi and all that, and Ruth, right? So it's kind of significant. The other place it's mentioned also in Revelation chapter 6. I'll just read it real quick. 6:6. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine. We're not going to talk about it. Just going to read it.
And wasn't barley like a cheaper bread?
It was. It was
'Cause-
the coarser stuff.
Yeah.
So it was cheaper. Didn't have the fine, floury sort of texture that you might get from wheat, okay? So the disciples are like, here's all we've got. It's an exercise in futility here, Jesus. This is a ludicrous situation. They, kind of shrug their shoulders. Is there anything significant about 5 loaves and the 2 fish, about the numbers themselves?
No.
Equals 7.
Okay, well, adds up to 7.
Where's the need?
That's significant, okay. But I don't think so. What might be the point of mentioning them?
How small it was and
Yeah,
how big a
exactly.
miracle
Just
it
to
is.
draw attention to this is so little. How can, it's not like they had 1,000 fish or something. There's nothing there to work with practically, okay? It just magnifies the hopelessness. So Jesus then, in verse 10, Jesus said, have the people sit down. Now there was much grass on the place, so the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Mark's gospel specifies green grass, okay? The green grass of home, right? It's because, why is it so green? Because it's the, sort of the rainy season.
Yeah.
This was the time of the Passover, so it connects it to that period of time there. It's sort of near Easter. 5,000 men, all gospels mention this number, would have included the wives and children, so upwards of like 15,000. Matthew, verse 19, please.
Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass.
Okay,
And
that's good.
taking the 5 loaves and the
No,
2
no.
Stop.
That's good, thank you, right there.
Oh,
Okay,
they
I'm
sat
sorry,
on
I'm
the
gonna
grass.
cut, I'm gonna chop it just to
okay.
maintain the continuity here.
It's choppy reading.
Choppy here, yeah. Mark 39-40.
Then he commanded them all to sit down in groups on the green grass.
Yeah.
So they sat down in groups by hundreds and by 50s.
Luke 14 and 15.
For there were about 5,000 men, and he said to his disciples, have them sit down in groups of about 50 each.
And
Oh, sorry. And they did so and had them all sit down.
right, and it's read in verse in 10 in John 6. Jesus would have the people sit down. Why this orderly arrangement?
It's easier to hand things out.
I think
Yeah,
that's certainly
absolutely.
one element of it,
And they're
right?
gonna stay put.
Crowd control or whatever. You know, get the bouncers out there.
The disciples can go about it.
I think that's a very good answer too, right? And organized so you can distribute the food, right? Anything else?
Well, kind of keep them from being too, I don't know, like disruptive or something, you know, kind
Okay,
of. like
keep them
you say,
calm. I
yeah.
think that's a good point. As you sit down, you're gonna be calmer, right? So it keeps them, maintains the poise, right? I put
Doesn't it
down,
have an element though of, a preparation? I mean, it doesn't look like it from the disciples' point of view, but when Jesus has everyone sit down, there's this, unfolding of God's plan
okay,
that he didn't panic because he knew he was gonna do this.
Yeah. And maybe they could then have an air of expectation, like what's gonna happen now? He's gonna do something
Right,
for us.
yeah.
yeah, so it sort of it sets things up, it calms things down, it sets things up so we can be ready for the next revelation of what's gonna happen, right?
Sitting down for their meal.
Yeah, exactly, that's a good point there. I also put down just one last thing, it gives them the ability to have an accurate count.
Yeah.
More or less, right? So it's just sort of like four things I sort of looked at, four things. Anyway, so that's some things. If you think of some more, I'd be curious about it. But okay, verse 11, Jesus then took the loaves. When he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. So the synoptics is a little bit different in the synoptics. It says here Jesus gave thanks. In the synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it says he gave a blessing. Okay, he blessed the bread. No major difference in there, but it's just sort of distinctively a little different. We'll read Mark 41 and 42.
And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing. And he broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples to set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all. And they all ate and were satisfied.
Okay, that's in parallel. Luke 16 and 17a.
And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing over them. Then he broke the loaves and gave them to his disciples to set before the crowd. And they all ate and were satisfied.
So you're blessing there, blessing in Mark. Peggy 19.
Then he ordered the crowd to sit down on the grass, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing. Then he broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds.
And they all
And
ate.
they all ate and were satisfied,
That's
and
it.
that's the end of
Chop,
it.
chop.
Chop, chop, stop.
Okay.
Where did the baskets come from?
Okay, hang on just a minute.
I wanted to know too.
Just hold on to that, okay? I'm gonna say the most fascinating thing that blows my mind away is about what happens in the distribution. How are they distributed, okay? Because when we read them, you will see the chosen. For instance, you may be sort of referring that they have they find baskets in the crowd, okay? And they get the crowd, and they show pictures of, Jesus tears apart, puts it in the basket basically, and then they're all like thinking, they're all skeptical about the whole thing, and one of them finally lifts the basket, realizes the thing is full, okay? It doesn't say that in the Gospels. Now that's one rendition of how to do it, you can do it that way. But it specifically, more or less, I think, leans to the idea of Jesus actually putting it in their hands, okay? Sends out the disciples with this minuscule piece, and it says he gave the pieces to the disciples. Now, so it's not like a basket case situation, a hopeless sort of thing. Because you remember in what happened in Cana? How did Jesus start the miracle there?
Well, it started with water.
And they
Filled
did what?
them to
They
the
filled
brim.
them, right?
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, and then they pulled it out, and it was, they never got to see anything, so to speak. It was just like done, magically, so to speak. They didn't get to see it. They filled so, and likewise, the chosen sort of like will fill the basket, so to speak. But Jesus doesn't say that Jesus put anything in the basket. So they go out with these sort of little pieces of bread. So what I wanted to do was have a special person, Mr. John. Could you come up here, please? This is my sourdough bread, my precious sourdough bread, okay?
Yeah, right.
Sour.
Sounds like Wonder Bread.
I want you to go feed the crowd there, okay?
Okay.
So,
No,
won't.
honey, I can't get this on the
Oh,
video.
okay. He's going. Oh,
They're
you
not
give him.
participating.
Oh, just you don't have to eat
Just
it.
do
You don't have to eat it, don't have to eat it.
That's good.
Everybody has to get this.
A wheat piece of bread, 'cause I'm gonna run
So
out.
what is he doing? What is he
He's breaking it.
He's taking off a little piece of it, okay? Now, what I'm going to venture to say is that the disciples would have done just exactly that same sort of thing and thinking, this is like a token crumb, hope you
The
get
first
a
20
little,
people.
a little taste out of it because nobody's even gonna get any of it, okay?
Sort of like
But-
Sunday's dinner. The
Yeah,
last ones of us that were, the first people, they
Thanksgiving.
had got their plates
Uh,
full, and the last of us,
yeah,
we
Got
were,
yeah,
Scrounged.
there was nothing there, right?
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, good point. So, but the thing that I'm saying here is that when John starts tearing it off, okay, I think what's gonna happen is they're gonna realize
It's
it's
not
not,
going.
it's nothing coming off, okay? You remember the burning bush? What happened with that? The fire did not consume the bush, and I think likewise, what's going on is they're taking it off, but it's still there, okay?
Sort of like the woman with, was it Elijah and the oil?
Yes,
and
exactly.
the
The oil,
flour?
filling the oil pans. There was still content in there, okay, it didn't leave. And I'm thinking, well, what happened? They finally realize it and they start shuffling these things out like cards or something. It never sort of leaves their hands. But still, I can imagine, this is a multitude of people. Can you imagine the time it's going to take to feed these people? But when I'm getting, I don't think it was just sort of like a bunch of baskets where they pick them up and they just start dumping them as they go across, sort of like, I think there's a very strong reason why I think Jesus did that. And part of that reason is because, you're never going to feel like you have this, what did they have in their hands essentially?
A piece of fish or bread.
But in reality, it was an infinite size bread.
Oh, yes, yes.
Right? They couldn't see it, they couldn't feel it. Okay, it was just this simple little piece of bread. Okay? That seemed like it was nothing. And that's the way that God's grace is to us. Sometimes. You're not gonna feel it and sense it.
1930, a hymn was written, and of course it would go away when I say that. But it's, He giveth more grace.
Mm-hmm.
And it says in that, but it shows back up again. I cannot believe that.
Of course.
Drum roll.
But it says, when we reach the end of our hoarded resources, so we know how hard it is to hoard up something. All they had was 8 months' wages. And you said that's why they picked the number, is because that's all they had.
Right.
It's like, when we reach the end of that, that's when the Father's full giving,
Begins.
and it says His love has no limit, His grace has no measure, and His power has no boundary.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing where when we run out
Yeah.
is where He starts.
We exhaust ourselves. We exhaust, depending upon ourselves, lots of times, this is what happens, okay?
I wonder when they started giving people a whole piece of, like almost a whole, because if
Right.
they had 5 loaves, they would have each probably gotten like a half of a loaf
Yeah.
to distribute, and so how those first people just got a teeny tiny bit. Whereas maybe by the time they finished one group and they realized they still had some, the next people, well, let's try a bigger piece.
Right, who knows? But it doesn't, I wish they would have had some little comment, it'd be great
Was
to
that
have.
why He had the baskets? Because it sounds like they were all
'Cause
given
then
a
they-
little, and then what was gathered up afterward was, it's like, where did this even come from?
Right.
Because like you said, they had the bread that never ended in their hands, that even when they ate, they had something left over. They didn't,
Right.
and so that must have been the really freaky part of just suddenly it's like, I can't finish this.
And I wonder, did the disciples give each person a piece, or did they sort of, like when we light the candle, you light one and then the other person
No,
gives it, so.
I think in the disciples distributed it.
Oh.
It seems to be the way it's worded. I don't think it was like, okay, pass it on sort of a thing. I'm
It
pretty
does
sure
say
it
baskets though.
was. The baskets are gonna come up. You really like those baskets.
I know, it's like, where did they
About
come
the
from?
baskets.
Well, it does say they have baskets.
It's
Right,
the
but
last thing, when they
But
picked
that's
them
when
up.
they finish it, okay?
Not the-
Hang on, Emily. So my point is,
In all of them, the thing was is that Jesus looked up to heaven to say the blessing. So I think this is, from the Father to the Son blessing this food, because it says something, it tells me how bad I am in a scholarly way, but that had the everlasting water
Yeah.
that never, and at the well, I think Jesus told the woman about the food,
The
Bread of life.
living water.
living water,
Yeah.
that you will never be thirsty again.
It's like, you see
And I
these
think
parallels
this is
sort of
kind of
similar,
the
right?
similar in that
Right.
you're not, they were not hungry.
Right. The interesting thing is, the disciples had already seen a bunch of miracles. They had just come back from doing a bunch of healings themselves, okay? But they had seen nothing like this, okay? Where it's kind of like creation in your hand, basically, occurring. And you're seeing it. It's not just taking somebody who basically is just has a broken bones or something like that. It's already there and repairing them, so to speak, or an illness, but it's something totally different. It's the creation of something that wasn't there before.
And it was also provision for a crowd. It was provision for everybody there, not just one person.
Yeah.
I'm kind of overwhelmed by the crowds. When you're in a crowd and people think that there's only X amount of food, they're gonna get, ugly.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I want my fair
Yeah.
share. I don't
Right.
care if you get yours. I want to make sure I'm fed.
Right, right.
And the crowds, none of this.
It doesn't show them up for
None of
getting
them.
upset and all that, right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there may have been some complaining and whining, but they're seeing things happening, so maybe they sort of settle down and they assume something's gonna happen that we're not aware of, but something incredible is going to occur. Two things this story is not about. One, because you'll hear it many times used as this example of, we got this gift from the little boy, okay? 5 loaves, 2 fish. Isn't it wonderful what God can do with your gift, okay? He can turn it and multiply it to enough, to the nth degree and create things out. It's not what the story is about. It's a beautiful little example application that you might draw from it. It's not really what the story is about. Nor is it completely about what I just said earlier about it being, God's grace, His infinitude of grace, giving you, keeping you going. So even when you don't feel like it, you sort of act upon what you have, and you still go out with it. But the point is that the thing is, the event is about Jesus. It's telling something about Him, and it's tied in with John's Passover comment in verse 4. We're not going to cover that today, but it waits like next week or whatever. Okay, so it's just kind of interesting, there's no bread lines, to kind of get food. It's all Jesus, He has them handed out in a very organized fashion, right? All right, verses 12 and 13. And when they had eaten their fill, He told His disciples, gather up the leftover fragments that nothing may be lost. So they gathered them up and filled, 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. Now, the synoptics all say, and they were all what? Satisfied, okay? Satisfied is one way to describe it. John says, what does John say? They had as much as they wanted, okay? It's just kind of a different look at it, just in what's like, okay, I'm not going to get what I wanted, but I'm satisfied with what I got. No, it says they all had as much as they wanted. Yes, that's a real plentitude, right? Like, all the Gospels mention the 12 baskets. Let's get to the baskets, okay? Jesus did not want anything wasted, right? Now, is this something about, the principle of waste not, want not?
No, I think you want to show how abundant
I think
God's
so too.
grace was.
I mean, I think you could say, okay, just like, I just want to be a good steward, but I think it's more like, I'm just showing you the abundance of what God's grace is like, okay? And it says 12 baskets collected at this feeding. At the 4,000, anybody remember how many were there? How many baskets collected? There were 7 baskets.
Okay.
So let you know on that, okay? Why are the numbers mentioned, and is there any significance to them? 12 baskets. 12 is an interesting number, right?
Probably one per disciple, right?
Disciples, okay, I think that's very good. Also the 12 tribes of Israel. There's a strong connection with 12 in the history of Israel, right? I think that is associated with that. But anyway, other than that, I'm not sure there's anything else significant. But what I wanted to know is a little bit, where did all the baskets go? Once they got the 12, you didn't never hear anything else about the basket. Who took a basket?
Whoever started with them probably got them back.
Okay, but where'd the basket go?
But it doesn't even say how big the baskets were, you
Yeah,
know,
these are-
because
they're-
you think of the big baskets, that's what I usually think of.
Right.
But the little boy probably had a small
Yeah.
little basket.
There was two, and the feeding the 4,000, there's big baskets. And this one, they're smaller baskets. So
How do we know?
it's just the Greek word, they're different.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so they know that the size of them are different. These are smaller baskets. But the point is, you just never hear anything about the baskets. Did they give them out to a few people in the crowd? Did the disciples take them, or what? What happened to the baskets?
Well, didn't you say that they were probably gathered from people in the crowd?
Oh yeah, I
Originally,
assume.
maybe they gave them back.
Well, maybe they did. Maybe they gave them to their owner of the baskets. You're right.
It's interesting that in a crowd that big, that the little boy was the only one that thought about bringing lunch. His mother was
That's a
probably.
lot of lunch for a little boy.
Yeah.
No, but these are not wonder loaves of bread. You know, these
They
are
were small.
like a small piece, like a piece of pita bread, sort of like a small pita bread or something, and then small fish. I mean, they're probably bigger than a sardine, sort of like, but nothing like a big, you know, hunky salmon or something like that.
Sushi.
Small stuff.
Sushi.
Sushi. Okay, yeah, sushi. All right. So, but he says they did gather them up, and nothing be wasted. In verse 14, when the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, "This is indeed the prophet who's to come into the world." Now, only John's gospel includes this bit of information here about Jesus being this prophesied figure from the Old Testament. Remember that in Deuteronomy 18? We've talked about that a number of times there. Now, so they look at it, but you can see them looking at Moses. What did Moses do in the wilderness with the Israelites? Fed them, right? He instigated the manna stuff and all
And
that.
the quail.
Quail and all. He fed them in the wilderness, right?
But he didn't exactly feed him. They asked him for food, and then he said the manna was coming, but it came
But
down from heaven. Yeah, I know. but it's
Technically, you're
still-
quite right.
Yeah.
But you're going to associate food with
Moses,
Moses.
yes.
That's what you get out of it. Also, what else did Moses do? The most significant thing he did.
The part in the water.
He led them out
Oh,
of bondage, right? Got them out
okay.
of bondage,
That's-
Egyptians, right? So Jesus had just fed this huge crowd, right? Jesus like Moses. What else might Jesus do?
Get him out of the.
Lead us out of bondage from under the Romans, right? So you can see why they had this idea of this is indeed the prophet, and they're going to want to make him king here in just a moment. So, but what's funny, later on in verse 30 in John chapter 9, they're going to ask when Jesus says, you know, I am the bread of life and all this sort of stuff, they're going to say, well, they're going to ask for a sign that they might believe his word.
They just had a
You
sign.
just had a miracle beyond your mind could see and understand. We want a sign that says we should believe you. It just shows the attitude of people, right? So anyway, in verse 15, perceiving then they were about to come and take him by force to make a king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. The feeding of the 5,000 in the Gospel of John is the high point of Jesus' ministry, okay? Meaning where there's so many people that are all of a sudden following him. But as I said, at the end of the chapter, it's going to be crash and burn. All right, we'll look at that later. Moses was not just God's liaison for manna, but he led the people out of the bondage of Egypt. So why wouldn't Jesus now lead the people out of bondage from Rome? The kingship theme is important in light of theological systems that we look at. And we looked at one, for instance, this idea of Jesus did not want to be king. That goes against the Lion King song, you know. What was that? I just want to be
I just
king.
want to be king.
Yeah.
Just can't wait to be king.
I just can't wait to be king, right?
Yeah, Esther could tell you.
Yeah, Esther could sing that to me. So it's interesting. Jesus did not want to be king under their ideas of what kingship meant. He did not want to establish a kingdom that they were looking for, so he got away from them. All right, that kind of finishes our discussion today. Any comments or questions?
Why did you call this the high point and
Yeah,
not the
call it-
triumphal entry?
Because I think when you look at it, just in terms of all of a sudden this huge acceptance, when you look at, for instance, at the triumphal entry, I do agree with you more in the synoptics. I think you'll see that there's a crowd shouting the Hosanna and so forth like that. It was just a very short kind of lived kind of thing. They're calling for his crucifixion a few days later kind of a thing. So I think you could argue that is also quite a big thing. But I think in terms of just like the adoration, perhaps of the magnitude of the crowd and all.
The tipping point for the spread.
Yeah.
It's more of the feeding.
Yeah.
Okay.
One other thing the scripture doesn't tell you either. I was thinking as you were going through all the intricacies of this. What kind of fish were them?
I don't know, they don't obviously
What lives there in
specify.
that lake?
I don't, that's a good question, I didn't research that, I don't know.
Well, I'm astounded you
Yeah.
didn't. You know.
Yeah, but I mean, it is, they're not huge,
Yeah, they were small fishes.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know. I think I remember seeing the name, but I didn't jot it down. Yeah,
But it was very interesting the way you brought all that through.
good.
I enjoyed it.
Okay.
It reminds me of scripture. Ready to show thyself approved unto God.
Yeah, rightly
Workmen
dividing.
who needeth not be ashamed,
Yes,
rightly dividing the word of truth.
excellent.
That's, you divided it all up.
Okay. Okay, I wanted to bring together all the gospels, they all cover this thing. It is important that we look at it from all the angles that are presented to kind of get a composite, get a comprehensive look at it and to understand what they all focused on, what they all saw was important, and put together the whole story in our minds. Okay.
This kind of reminds me